Welcome to the Gents Place. I'm Ben Davis, and I'm excited to introduce a new feature that celebrates our amazing community of members. Welcome to the lounge at the Gents Place. I've got a guest here, a very special guest, Stefan Johnson, with me today. Stefan Johnson is the proud owner of one of the best, probably the best trademark in all of sports, Beyond the Game. You may have thought you've heard of that before, but Stefan is building something really special with this that I know you haven't heard of. I want to tell you a little bit before I let Stefan speak, because once he starts, he does not stop. So give me 30, 60 seconds here. I want to tell you how I met Stefan. As some of you may know, I've got a son that's a basketball player that's also survived 4 open heart surgeries. And Pierce is his name, and Pierce is shooting threes, and I'm just feeding him threes at the local YMCA. And I hear a voice from the side of the court that says, "Who's his shooting coach?" And Pierce doesn't necessarily have a shooting coach. His dad's taught him a little bit. His dad can shoot. Stefan may admit that, he may not. But I said, he trains with this person, that person. I've taught him how to shoot a little bit. And Stefan had walked up to us shortly after that and asked for permission to speak with Pierce and to mentor Pierce, because it's one of the best basketball shots that he has ever seen. That's saying a lot, because Stefan is a former NBA player. I didn't know this until I met Stefan, and everything he tells me I have to Google to see if it's true or not. And you'll see why when he starts talking. You'll get your Google out, make sure, validate it. But he said that in the entire history of the NBA, there's only been less than 5,000 players total in the whole history walking this globe. Less than 5,000 people, and it is true. Google says it's 4,800 people. So it was a big compliment coming from one of less than 5,000 people to ever make it to the NBA, to recognize my son's shot, and to see, I think, a lot more than just his basketball shot in him, of him being a survivor and thriver of all of these open heart surgeries. And so, anyways, a very special moment. I just thought I was going to a typical day at the Y, and my life and my son Pierce's life has never been the same. The verdict's still out whether it's better or worse, but definitely was not the same. It will not be the same. So Stefan, welcome to the show. Welcome to the lounge at the Gents Place. And thank you for being a member at the Gents Place as well. We only allow members on the show. So I appreciate you signing up.
That was amazing, by the way. The honor is all mine to be able to say I'm a part of a journey that is definitely an anointing, God send. I can't say enough things. Those of you out there who have a faith and truly believe, that God has a plan for us all, has a plan and a time for us all, and that nothing happens too soon or too late if you truly have faith. Meeting you and your son that day was definitely divine.
No question.
And everything that's happened in between that, I just have to tell you, I thank God for you. I pray for you daily, for your patience to deal with me, because I wake up with me. Okay, so I already know what you're dealing with.
You got it worse than anybody.
Hey man, it's never a day off, and there's never time off. I'm stuck in here. Okay, so God's grace is the only thing that keeps me going. But Pierce's story and your story, watching the father-son chemistry, and just watching you guys, and just, and you allowing me to come and even say anything at that father-son moment. It was a lot about that whole time. And I've come to that, I go to that Y. I've been a Y member for 30 plus years. And to watch Pierce's shot, I was like, wow, I wonder who's been working with that kid. It was just so pure. And, I was watching you, and I was like, well, I wonder if that guy's his coach, and I just saw how attentive you were, and how, just basically vested you were in everything that he was doing, and how you guys were exchanging, in the conversation. And I just, me being me, I mean, what would you call it, emotional intelligence. Nothing said don't interrupt. Everything said go and introduce yourself. And Pierce right now to me is one of the greatest shooters I've ever seen. I've been around the world. Dottie Package, Reggie Miller, Sean Higgins. You can go down a long list of some great shooters, and I think Anthony Edwards has a chance to be really, really great. And the thing about great shooters is the rhythm. They all have this rhythm that is flawless. I mean, you can set the clock on it. Ray Allen, I've left out a lot. Steph Curry, do we even need to say, that he is in the conversation, if not, the greatest shooter we've seen in our time. So your son definitely got my attention, and I wanted to be a part of that. And that journey that he's on, I watched Hank Gathers, Bo Kimball, Kurt Thomas, some great scorers and shooters, and don't forget Mahmoud. He was Chris Jackson when I first
Oh
saw him
yeah, I remember
at
Chris.
my
I
alma
was
mater.
living in Colorado during Chris Jackson's time. I would go to the Nuggets games, get little $6 seats with my brother to watch Chris Jackson and Dikembe.
Prolific shooter, right? So Chris was at LSU, my alma mater, right? So I saw Chris, Stanley, Shaq didn't show up that day. Went down for a pickup game and sat with Coach Brown afterwards, and I said, Coach, I said, you got a nice squad here. This may be the year for you. I said, you should try to. I said, I work out with some guys out on the West Coast, Bo Kimball and Hank Gathers at Loyola Marymount. I said, I think that would be a great game. And Coach Brown looked at me and said, well, let me call. He called Joe Dean. Joe, do we have a game scheduled? Do we have any opening on the schedule? And Joe Dean was like, yeah, we got an opening. He said, well, look, try to, Stefan's here, and he's saying Loyola Marymount would be a great game for LSU. Last year's leading scorer versus, I think it was Hank had been the leading scorer. Bo ended up leading it that next year. So you had Chris Jackson, Hank Gathers, and Bo Kimball all on the court at the same time. All three were led the nation in scoring. And sure enough, the game was set up. Highest scoring game in the history of the NCAA of a losing team. I think Loyola scored like 140 something
Oh my
points and
gosh.
lost. Shaq and Hank were going at it, and Hank was my guy. I mean, I was a lot closer to Hank than I was to Bo, and now Bo and I are still very close friends, but Hank and I were very close. And working with Hank, Hank had a really funky shot, right? So he was the beginning of me really going to task on how do you correct someone's shot, their shooting mechanics. And I got good at it because I couldn't fix Hank's. It was just baked in. He just had this thing he was doing, and he was like, this is how I'm going to do it. But Hank, we all know Hank's story with his
Well,
heart.
you need to share that because I didn't know Hank's story, and I'll tell you one of the things that why I know it was divine intervention when we met was you had heart issues. Talking to my son, who you did not know had heart issues, and having represented and been a best friend of a guy that had heart issues and didn't make it through his last game. But tell the story about Hank. A lot of people don't know that.
Very, very, very touching story. For me, beyond the game, the trademark came from me trying to process Hank and his passing because I felt like it was avoidable. The NCAA at that time wasn't very vested in the well-being of the players, the athletes, would you say? Now you have NIL and everybody thinks that, now we've arrived. No, they still don't take care of athletes the way I think they should. I had retinal detachments. I broke my back. I got all kind of ailments I had just from playing in the NCAA. And made it to the NBA, but made it to the NBA barely. I barely made it in because of all the ailments. I had hernias the whole night, but it was all from my time in sports. But Hank had a heart condition. Those of you who don't know, Hank Gathers, you can Google that story. 30 for 30 has a special that they do out there that's pretty amazing story, but it's nothing like from behind the scenes because I would go to the doctors with Hank and hear what they were saying. And I say, Hank, I asked the doctors, what is his worst case scenario? Worst case scenario is he can die. I'm like, and they laughed because I'm like, that's not funny. But in their minds, like, what's the worst case scenario for all of us? Is I think which one of the doctors said. And I looked at Hank, and Hank like nudged me like, yo, shut up. I didn't bring you here to screw up my career. Just let them talk. Well, later on, we found out that, Hank never took any drugs. He wasn't that kind of guy, but he didn't want to take the drug that was going to keep him alive because it made him groggy. It made he couldn't perform, and nothing was bigger than basketball. Just like your son,
Yep.
you couldn't keep him off the court. Okay, he's like, this is my heaven. This is what I do. So Hank, his story, I don't want to say too much about it here. You can read about the story, but Hank played in his last game. That memorable, fateful day. Went up for the alley oop, the shot of a lifetime, right? The alley oop dunk of a lifetime. But he had a heart issue, and we don't know to this day. Was he properly medicated? But and you said about my heart situation. They've told me I had the leaky valve and all those different things. And I said, if we do this show Beyond the Game, we have to talk about how God has aligned all this to help somebody out there. And Harvey Catchings is a great friend of mine, and his daughter Tamika, is one of the greatest of all times. And Harvey's had a heart transplant, and he told me when I told him about my heart situation, he said, Stephon, you can't play with that. You got, I said, man, I'm making my peace. He said, no, you're not. It's not about you. You got to stay here as long as you can for the people that love you. They need you. So you need to do whatever they're telling you. So this heart thing is a serious thing for a lot of athletes that they don't know. And we can go down a long list of players who've had heart attacks and people
Bronny James, right, had
ton of
that big issue.
Major story right there. And people don't talk about what all Bronny James had to overcome to just be back on the court, and what your son had to overcome. 4 open heart surgeries, and how many surgeries total?
10, yeah.
10 surgeries total, and the latest ablation within the last couple of months. So, you don't talk about a stud. So it wasn't about Beyond the Game anymore, the show just for the show. It's about, the love of a father and what you and your family have endured, just going through the process, and how you put so much support behind Pierce, and you never, ever try to discourage him from living out his dream and playing the game of basketball. I never heard one. You guys are the most amazing people in the world to me, because when I was told about my heart condition, I met you and I said, look, I want to give you lessons that I know will benefit you, because I don't know how much longer I'll be here. From what I had been told at the time, I'm still here. They've been telling me this for years. I don't know how much longer I have, but I have enough time to say right now, it's serious. You have, doctors are very arrogant, some of them. They don't take the time. The bedside manner thing is gone. It's out the window. There's a bunch of doctors out there that they still, do that. You said, Steph, I don't rely on them. I do my research and I make
Just
sure
an
I have the right
opinion,
question.
right? That's
And
it.
you taught me a different way of approaching it. So I'm still in my fight, just like, and I'm inspired by your son. So everything about him. And then you saw Jason Tatum's reaction
Yeah,
when
that
we
was
went
great.
to the Celtic game,
Stephon and I went to Boston Celtics game recently, and we got to meet Jason Tatum after the game.
And Philip Pierce. And Philip Pressey.
Phil Pressey. But it was interesting because when we saw Tatum, that wasn't a planned, we're scheduled a meeting. It was catching him.
Yeah.
And I knew I had 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. So I just spit it out. I'm like, hey, meet my son. Here's his story.
Yeah, he's a Make-A-Wish kid.
And 20 seconds later, Tatum saying, that's a hell of a story. It stopped him in his tracks.
Yeah.
It stopped him in his tracks.
It's inspirational.
This show is about interviewing our members, getting to know our members, because there's the people that walk in here are incredible. You've walked in a number of times and bumped into people you hadn't seen in years.
Yeah.
We met, is it Jim Jeffcoat?
Jim Jeffcoat.
He was in here the other day.
Yeah.
Sean Bradley. I had no idea. I don't even know. I've been hanging out here more often. Donnie Nelson. Saw him the last time he came
Jerry
in.
Jr.
But I mean, Sean Bradley is an NBA player, and he's paralyzed now, and hopefully he'll be on the show. But this is about getting to know our members better. And they may have services or businesses or something to offer our other members. They may not have anything to offer but a story, an inspirational story. But with you and me working with you and learning more about Beyond the Game, and what that really means. I'll tell you, like, the witness that I've seen to that is not only just approaching my son, but I have seen you cannot help yourself when we're at the Y. You can't help yourself but try to help other people, right? And it's a lot of it if not most of it, if not nearly all of it, is up here. So you can see a dad and a son working together and say, hey, this is there, you need some help.
Yeah.
There's something, and it is beyond. I mean, I think of that mental thing. It's not the skills. It's not how to shoot better, but it's getting your mind right.
The approach. How do
Yeah.
you approach it? You know, and you do it well. I watch you in business and how you do your thing in business. I'm learning from you. You don't teach me anything, but I'm smart enough as a mentor myself to
Just
learn
soak
when
it in,
even
man.
the person that you're trying to learn from is not teaching, because you can learn what not to do just by watching people and observing people. How observant are you? Basketball IQ is not always about how much you know about the X's and O's. It's about how much you know about your limitations, your strengths, and ultimately how to evaluate your opponents. So what I wanted, your greatest opponent is yourself, because it's how you view yourself that you're going to approach and attack whatever challenges you have. Pierce, in your mind space, you guys are unbelievable, and Lauren and Benjamin, Caroline, you guys, you're you're amazing. Okay, the whole Davis family is amazing, and
Thank
you've
you.
done an amazing job with your family, your children, and how you guys as a unit. You know, I'm not saying you're perfect. Every family has its flaws, but I'm saying from how you guys attack your challenges. I love it, and it's a testament to your faith, and I know that as much as I've been around you guys. This whole thing about all of us is, do you have negative talk to yourself? What is your talk to yourself? What is that inner voice telling you? And who is the inner voice? For me, it's the Holy Spirit. For me, it's Christ. I've always been a challenged person mentally. You just depends on who you talk to and what era of my life you talk to them. They can tell you stories that I can't even remember, but I know I've been touched in a lot of ways, good and bad. But I've been able to overcome that because of what I know sustains me, and I have a calling. That calling is a gift to encourage others and inspire others to grow. No one can grow, or nothing can grow if it's not healthy. You're growing the least when you're unhealthy in your thoughts and in whatever environment you're in. No seed planted in unhealthy soil can grow, right? And can't grow in sand unless it's some type of plant that only grows in sand. So for knowing all those things about yourself, what is the environment you set up for yourself to grow? Is growing even important to you? Because if you want to accomplish something and you're not factoring in, how do I grow into that thing? I grew into this, Stefan. I'm 62 years old. I grew into this man that I am right now. My oldest daughter, he's a professor, at an Ivy League school, and my youngest daughter went to an Ivy League school for master's. My son, San Diego State, you know, pharmaceutical sales. My wife's an accountant. There was excellence all around me. So my mind space always is trying to keep up with all that they're doing. You are in an environment that I can't even imagine. I wouldn't survive a day. And if I had to walk a mile with you, or just be with a day in the life of Ben Davis, that is, everyone should experience it. I hope we get that, where you guys, our
Oh, hopefully
producers.
this is a little bit of it. This is my life,
Well,
right?
you have, God has blessed you in a lot of ways. You're not. I never see you out of character or stressing to be something that you're not. I see you striving for excellence. I see you striving to be the best you can be and putting your best face forward. But I never see you out of character or trying to be something you're not. And that genuineness is what Pierce said, about me when he first. That was the
Yeah.
greatest honor he could have.
No, he did. He did. He's talked to a lot of people. I've introduced him to a lot. He's had a ton of coaches in his life, and he's like, Dad, this guy actually, like, he believes what he's saying. It was
Unfortunately.
just I mean, how uncommon is that, though, that people, you can look at someone and they believe what they're telling you. And it didn't mean that you told us a bunch of things that were not, didn't put you in a good light. Let's say
Exactly.
that, right?
Exactly.
But they were,
Yeah.
but they were the truth.
The truth. And nowadays it's important to focus on fathers, right? So he told you as a father, Dad, I just want someone to tell me the truth. And I said to you the other day, you said, Pierce and his team, they ran up on a really athletic team. And Pierce we've already talked about what an amazing shooter he is. The NBA overseas, basketball overseas, everything about being a world class athlete means just that. Are you a world class athlete? And they can throw out a baseball, a soccer ball, or basketball. If you're not a world class athlete and in world class athlete condition, you're not going to perform. And that is something that a lot of these mentors and coaches don't focus on. They just want to take the parents' money. What I do is I find out what kind of condition is this kid, because I just share with you, Hank passed away. I've had, unfortunately, kids I've worked with where it's eating disorder. I've had young men that I've worked with that are in the NBA that have lost their careers because it's drugs. If you're not approaching all this stuff in the right way, you don't have much chance of succeeding. But with young athletes that are not athletic, you're going to have to be in better shape than those more athletic guys, or you're just not going to be able to perform. And that's something a lot of the mentors and coaches, Justin, HQ is the best program I've ever seen. What Justin's doing over there is amazing. What he's doing with those kids, but he's he's typecast into a space that he can't say too much about what kids don't have because he can't address how to get it to them. He's providing a service, and that is to showcase and play. He's not providing the service of player development.
That's one of the biggest challenges in youth sports. So like for all the parents out there that are thinking about, I mean, I'll vouch for Stefan to hire him as a mentor all day long. But the challenge in youth sports is who does that athlete have in his or her life that is focused on their development as their number one priority. And you probably won't find a middle school coach, a high school coach, head coach, a high school assistant coach, an AAU head coach or assistant coach. You're going to be hard pressed to find someone whose number one priority is your child's development as both a player and as a person. And so that's why I love what you do is like, and you told me, hey, I'm going to tell you how much I charge, and you're going to wonder, how does this guy make any money? And you said, I don't.
I don't.
I just got a kick out of that because maybe that's why there's not a lot of guys out there like you because, in order to make a living doing something in youth sports, you got to run the AAU team and collect thousands of dollars or be a high school coach and get paid a salary. But I do hope that there's people like you, that are in every market that Gents Place operates in. And for those of you here in Dallas Fort Worth, that's where Stefan is, to hire someone for them to be the number one priority, right? And like that's what I know about you is like I know that Pierce's development is your priority when you're with him. It's not trying to get the next job. It's not trying to impress someone to win a state championship. It's not a record. So these coaches like 5 years of 20 plus game wins. And it's like they've designed a schedule to play. They'll play girls teams to get to their 20 game wins, right? But there's no agenda there beyond just being development. And we talked about Phil Pressey, met at the Celtics. I loved, and I didn't know this about Joe Mazzulla at the Celtics. He has multiple coaches on his team that just focus on 2 or 3 players each.
Mark Cuban started that, or he was one of the people that initiated that.
I love that.
Having that army of coaches back there. But speaking about what you were saying about the focus on kids and them getting better and me not making any money doing this, I designed Beyond the Game Foundation so I wouldn't have to worry about making money to get people to give contributions, and I can go and focus on those kids who can't pay for me as a mentor. I can't do it, individually for each kid. There's only so much time on the clock, right? So I can do it in groups. And you're just one of those few parents that gave me a shot to do it, that helped me. You sent me, tons of business, and I appreciate it. And tons of business meaning, I can take maybe 10 more kids. I can't get more than 24 and give each one of them. That ratio, I'm stretched out at 24.
You start to be like everybody else at that point.
Exactly.
You get 20, 30, 40 kids.
I wish I had, Justin should be my agent because what Justin is doing, I've dreamed of doing my whole life and I couldn't do, my whole life after basketball. But It's more of a ministry for me. It's more of a calling for me. Is get those. It's not a quantity thing. It's a quality thing because I've had so much success with the Hanks, the Kurt Thomases, the Sean Higgins. I can go through a long list of players that I've had a chance to mentor and be in their life. So the results are helping them to get to their goals. If they give me their goal, then I'm saying how serious are you about accomplishing this dream? Because the goals are going to be set daily. Can you make 500 shots a day? Do you have the discipline? And when I say that, when I told Pierce the first time, you got to make five, 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 five in a row all the way around star drill, or you're not a pro. And I saw the look in his face. It's like, who can do that? I'm like, NBA guards do that every day, or they can't go home. But I'm gonna. That's another Google moment. Go Google and see if that's true. Because looking at some of these guys in the NBA right now, shooting,
Yeah,
I'm
some of them was
wondering
hitting off the side of the backboard. You took
they need
Pierce to
some
a
player
game, and that
development
was
upgrades, right? Because there's some guys out there that are not performing, if you ask me.
yeah, yeah. Before we wrap up here, I do want to bring people on the show for the purpose of them being able to help our Gents Place member audience, whether it's the Gents Place members directly that are in this community with us, their kids, their families, anybody like that. What can you do to serve the Gents Place community? Like, tell us a little bit more about what that looks like. Is it mentorship for youth athletes? Is it skills training? Is it because you made it to the NBA, right? I mean, you were one of the less than 5,000 guys to do it. You have a lot of credibility there.
I was in there for a cup of coffee, so I'm not.
Yeah.
I ride. Anybody that knows me, they know that's the first thing out of my mouth. I played in the NBA, and they're like, "Oh, no way!" I'm like, "Google me." But it's more of a joke for me. I broke my back my senior year in college, and everybody said my career was over. Had retinal tears in both eyes. I had a lot of problems just trying to. I made it to the NBA, just barely fell across the line. So staying in the NBA was never an option for me. Just that I got there, I had accomplished my goal. So those families that are here in the community, or anybody that's listening and that sees this, what you're going to get from me is you're going to get a clear pathway to whatever your kid's future is. Beyond the game is me. I don't talk about my entrepreneurial accomplishments. I don't, because you have to go down the road of measuring it by money. Well, if they said a person in the top 5% in America has a certain amount of money, right? And a top 1%er has a certain amount of money in America. So if they use that metric for me, in a black community of what I am, or former black athletes, I'm in a number. I don't even know what that number is, but you want to be able to accomplish whatever you set out to accomplish. I'm from a place, this small town in East Texas. I'm country as a dozen of fresh brown eggs. They don't get no country than me, okay? So I can't hide it. All my life, I was that guy that was trying not to be the country boy. I was trying. One of my closest friends was Jerry Reynolds, right, from New York, from Brooklyn, New York City Player of the Year, High School Player of the Year. These guys used to make fun of me because I was so simple. But now, in my old age, or as I grew older, simplicity works. Less is more, and it's trying to grow into that person. Well, I'm 62 years old. It took me a long time to come to the realization I don't have to strive to be what others think that I am. So if a parent is out there dealing with a kid who may be about to experiment with something they shouldn't be experimenting with, or just having an identity issue, and not being respectful to their parents, as we say, this is all about the father, the importance of the father right now. You can't understate or overstate that. Father's Day is coming up.
Yep.
You and I have something planned, for those fathers who are here in the Gents Place who have a kid that's a basketball player. Unfortunately this year is a male basketball player, so we're doing a father-son thing. Paul Pressey and Philip Pressey are two of my heroes because both father and son won championships in the NBA as coaches, right?
We need to Google that. We need to research that. They may be the only pair.
They may be the only
Maybe,
one. But
yeah.
God does that to me, right?
Yeah.
He always puts me in these things where if I'll just look back, it's anomalies that it's like, am I, I can't take any of God's credit, any of his glory. He just allowed me to be a part of some really cool stuff that if the world or if America could measure things on what they really matter, what really matters, it won't always be about fame and money.
Yeah.
But that's the focus right now: fame and money and popularity, right? So kids are in a bad place trying to live up to what others think they should be. You're never going to win that battle. Don't measure yourself. If parents are listening, don't allow your kid to measure himself on some other kid, because it's never going to be fair. He's got to measure himself or herself off where they were versus where they are today, and measure going forward. Measure yourself against yourself. You used the word failure earlier. Failure is only failure if you don't learn from your
Yeah.
mistakes, right? So there's so many ways conceptually you can help a young person build confidence just by eliminating the negative talk they have to themselves.
Well, and that their parents could potentially give them. You and I were at a basketball game, high school basketball game, and you ran into a gentleman that you had known years prior, and his son is out there playing on the court, and you had asked him what his goals were, or what his son's goals were, and he said, he wants to go to the NBA, and then the dad said right after that, but that'll never happen. And you stopped him. I don't know if you remember that. You're like, don't say that. You told the dad, don't say that. If he wants to go to the NBA, it's possible. You're living proof of that, right? How many people told you you weren't going to the NBA and you were on the bench, you weren't starting, and you broke your back? You had retinal tears.
Yeah.
And so a
And
lot
Spud
of
Webb,
this,
throw Spud Webb in there.
shoot,
Spud
yeah.
was my agent when I was trying to figure out back then when teams were going around with the money bag. LSU and A&M were in a battle of who's going to get Stephon Johnson. And Spud was like, well, Stephon, that's a pretty easy decision right now, right? And it was all about, Spud having that clarity of knowing, the commodity is you, and where do you think you'll have the most support? And LSU won out over A&M because I didn't know who Shelby Metcalf was, but Dale Brown was like right in my face from the time he met me. We're going to do whatever it takes to get you to LSU. And if you look at what you were just saying, how this whole thing works, is set up a system, an environment, an ecosystem that allows you to grow. If we had to close this show on one thing, I would close it on: if you're not healthy in your thoughts, if you're not healthy in your team, wherever you're unhealthy, just know there's no growth happening in that space. You can't grow. So get healthy. If it's your finances, with me, I can say I can teach, because financial literacy for me was learning how not to spend, learning what money really is. Money is a concept in your head. If you're going to spend your money before you get it, money is never going to be tangible for you because you spent it before you got it, right? So if you have discipline and you understand what money can be for you, you got a chance at succeeding in this. But if money matters to you, you're going to fail,
Yeah.
because money is driving you. Deion Sanders said it best. He said, I never chased it. I never had to chase the bag. I always chased excellence. And if you can instill that in kids, be the best person, the best version of yourself you can be. How can you do that if you're not focused on what? Staying in the moment. You can't live in your past. You can't keep reliving your trauma of your past. And you can't be projecting for the future because it hasn't happened. All you can do is make the most of today. And that's where I am as a mentor, just keeping them in the moment. Let's do what we can do today, and let's mark what we didn't do well, and let's try to do better when we get together again. But those are, it sounds simple enough, and that's how I won the championship. It was a formula. The formula was, we know where we were and how bad we were getting our rear ends kicked, and we know where we are right now today. So let's go in this battle knowing what we have each other. I made the team play. First thing I did was one-on-one. I said, okay, all the guys that won one-on-one, you stay on this end. All the guys that lost, you go to the other end. I told them, I said, guys, I need to find out who's going to play. So then I said, the guys that won one-on-one, choose who you want to be on your two-on-two. Next game is two-on-two. Everybody chose their buddy. Two-on-two. The guys that lost, go to the other end. Guys that won, okay, now we could play 3-on-3. You get it, both you two GMs, choose who's your third player. They all chose. Boom, now we're playing 3-on-3. But in the 3-on-3, what was really odd is before we got to the 3-on-3, no one chose the leading scorer on the team. They all chose their buddies. And that's what gave me an idea. This is why we're losing. This is cliquish. But the 2-on-2 showed me the two best guys that played together. Now I got to get two of the guys that play together. Now find that one guy that can play with both those two clicks. And that was my formula. I knew which two to call the plays for and which two to count on throughout the game. I know which two were the best defenders. I knew which two were the best scorers. I had my formula. But, doing things like that, process of elimination, you got a formula now how to build a championship team because the language and the communication between the two guys, they grew up in Detroit playing together. The other two guys grew up in the country playing together. And I found one guy from Alabama that was friends with everybody on the team. That was my meanest, toughest rebounder and defender. So I had my formula. But anyway,
Well, I mean, we could talk for hours.
Yeah, basketball.
Actually, we do talk for hours.
We talk
So
probably
this
too
is
much.
just
Thank you. You're not going to be healthy if you keep talking.
Well,
too much.
I think for our members in our audience, there's a unconventionalism, if that's a word, to your madness, to your approach.
Yeah.
But it's centered around excellence, and it's individualized, it's personalized. For those that are listening or in the DFW area that have any kids, athletes in particular that are looking for mentorship, I can't highly recommend you enough. I appreciate, you being a member here and joining us on the lounge. So, guys, this is the conclusion of our episode here with Stefan Johnson. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next show.